So today on TBC, the Toronto Broadcasting Company, we're going to make a film section because most television channels have a film section to waste at least half an hour of broadcasting, I guess, by showing clips of somebody else's work. But this one's really exciting for me because I get to interview a mate of mine who I've known for years, and almost for as many years as I've known him, he's been trying to make this film happen. It's a good British film made by a good British man who's... my experience of is that I first met him when he was writing an interactive drama for teenagers for the BBC that I was producing. But I know he has a history before that, which we'll talk about. Made a great film called South Coast, which I still own on DVD, even though I don't own a DVD player. He has gone on to do interactive films, short films, and now a feature film. His name is Will Jewell. Welcome, Will.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you again.
Well, you know, you're in need of publicity, which we're going to talk about later, and I'm in need of looking credible, so I thought I'd get a film director on.
Fine by
and
me.
You're the only
Fine
film
by
director I know. But the thing, the first thing to say is congratulations. You've made a film that I, for many, many years, didn't think you were going to get off the ground. It was a fairly torturous process to get to
Been
this
fairly
point.
touch and go.
Please. I am fucking sitting. Have you noticed? I'm fucking sitting here, alright?
Steve, just sit! Sit!
Okay, Bob. Oh. Okay, seeing as you're so fucking polite about it.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Vic. Fucking hell.
So listen, the film is called Concrete Plans. I wanted to, I got a poster which I want you to sign for me at some point.
Signing that one. I'm not so keen on that poster. But,
Do you know, I like this one. I also like your red one, which I'll show a picture of later. But I actually quite like that one. If I was going to put one on my wall, I think I'd go for that one. I quite like it. It's quite sweet. I'm annoyed that you didn't ask me to draw it, obviously, but let's just move on.
yeah.
Well, it's called Concrete Plans. Tell me in 5 words what this film is about.
Builders not getting paid. I think for my very crass sort of elevator pitch for a while was it's Elfriede Zane Pet meets Shallow Grave. So that was my really very glib sort of, if someone asked me in a few lines. Or it's an inverse Straw Dogs, because it's about that kind of tension between you've got the builders and then your house. You know, Englishman's home is his castle. But in this film, we're kind of seeing it from the builder's side, because there's a bit of a social injustice that they're strung along, treated badly, payments late, and then things happen.
I think typical of a writer, that was a lot more than 5 words.
I gave you 5 words originally, Mike. Come on, come to some slack.
But Elfriede Zane Pet meets Shallow Grave. I think that's really interesting, because I'd written in my notes that at the beginning of the film, certainly, so the setup is 5-6 builders have got a job in Wales renovating a barn and outhouses in a farm owned by a ex-captain or something in the army. So there's a class divide within this small Welsh farm. And it starts off by making you think, oh, this might be Elfriede Zane Pet. This might be a hilarious bunch of builders having a laugh. And the film goes on quite a while in that vein. You start to think, oh, these are just tensions obviously between them and stuff. But your main character is Victor, played by Coran Bogdan.
Coran Bogdan, yeah.
Coran. Tell us a bit about how it centres on him.
Well, it's kind of it's strange because we open on him, which in film terms says he's your lead character, but I think it's such a democratic ensemble. I mean, he's key because I wanted to see this situation through kind of an outsider's eyes, because I think just in narrative terms, you know, Alice in Wonderland, all things like that, you always tend to go with the outsider because then the viewer is seeing all these things for the sort of first time with them. So it's sort of told from his point of view that he comes into this setup, and there's a lot of sort of undercurrents in there. He experiences prejudice. He realises later on he's being paid half what the other men are, even though he works twice as hard. There's all these kind of quite topical little touchstones, but that whole first half is a bit more sort of social realist, and we gradually bring the pot to the boil until things kind of boil over and go off into a quite sort of messy territory. And there's a shades that they're rerunning the Play for Today's at the moment, and I saw the black stuff last week. It was on, which then was turned into Boys from the Black Stuff, and I realised I must have seen that when I was a teenager or in my early 20s, and how much of it must have stayed with me, because there was a lot of that kind of. I realised, whoa, those themes from years ago. There's a lot of bits of that were kind of in it. So it sort of starts quite social realist, and then it goes off into thriller territory.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. There's almost two films in this film, isn't there? There's that one which is social realism, and then there's a turning point in the middle. Now, I don't know how many spoilers you want to give away, because obviously we want people to go. There'll be a link for people to go to the dreaded Amazon. Is it available anywhere else?
It's on Amazon, iTunes, Google, BT, Virgin, Sky, Xbox, Rakuten. I've never heard of, but Brilliant. It's on that. It's everywhere, basically.
So pick your supplier, basically. But I don't. Obviously, it's entirely in your gift as to how much you want to give away. I'll try not to give any spoilers, but the poster does hint that it gets very dark and thrillerish at some point, and there's a turning point in the middle of it. Tell me a bit about how that came about.
Yeah, well, I always kind of wanted to make a film that had sort of balanced the love of sort of British social realism and making it feel very rooted and real. And I don't like British thrillers where people just randomly pull out guns and suddenly it's like it. So I wanted it to feel very rooted, but I wanted it as well to kind of not feel preachy or anything like that. I wanted it to entertain you and strap you in and take you on this thriller ride. So it was always in my mind to try and sort of meld those two together. So I kind of think in that first half, it feels the steps, the fractures within the group, the social tensions between the kind of the guy in the big house played by Kevin Guthrie and his fiance and his financial advisor. There's tax evasion and various things swirling around, but it felt just gradually. I think if you get to know the characters before things all start to the wheels fall off and things start going bleak and turning on each other, you care about them more rather than, they're not just disposable victim number one, victim number two. So I always, with my writer head on, wanted to make sure the characters came to life. And I think it is a slow burn, but I like that. It's a bit, I always wanted to sort of walk this line between a sort of art house sensibility, but then gripping you with something that could play into more of a crossover audience. So it's kind of fairly deliberate. And hopefully I haven't given away too much.
Yeah, I mean, it came across to me as a film. No. It's a film I'd very happily discover on Netflix or something if it were there. It's that. It's a good British film, and yet it's got one of those twists that's almost Tarantino-like, where you just go, "Whoa, hang on, I'm watching a completely different format here." Basically, that's not what I expected. And I know we're not going to go too deeply into that, but there is this. Switch in the middle. There's a something that happens right in the middle that surprises you in terms of, oh god, how dark are these characters all going to go based on a very simple little premise. And I know that was kind of the first idea that you had for this, so the whole film is kind of hooked around this switch in movie.
There's the event that happens, then the aftermath of that. I think the event that happens is just months of being treated like crap and housed in a mouldy porter cabin, and then things come to the boil, and then the aftermath, when the red mist kind of clears, is then, well, what do we do about this? And the key kind of idea I had years ago, which I wrote as a short, was about these 5 guys basically deciding, well, why ruin all 5 lives? All they've done, sit in this mouldy porter cabin every night, is play poker because the TV doesn't work. And they go, well, how about we play one hand of cards, the loser takes the blame for what we just did, and the rest of us walk out of here and fill our boots. And it was that kind of, well, would you take that choice? Would you do it? And actually going back to when me and you met years ago, Mike, writing branching interactive dramas, we've actually created an interactive trailer in which this central moral question, we shot some extra footage with Chris Riley, the character who plays Jim, who kind of proposes this card game. And you can basically, it's got some clips from the film, and we shot loads of different outcomes. You can play hands of cards with him and choose whether or not to stick or twist, and you see whether or not you pay the ultimate price, basically, if you lose. So that, I think, is coming out. I think it's coming out either tomorrow or next week. But it's like, it's sort of like a little mini online poker game, but gives you a flavour of the film. So yeah, so there you go. Our shared history comes back to haunt me again.
We never stopped. Wannabes never stops haunting me, definitely. Not as bad as Fightbox, but we won't go into that. Okay, so what I want to do, one of the main issues I think in the film is this class divide. There's the guy that owns that. Well, does he own the house at all? It's something we discover later. Is he sort of living a life racked up with debt? But there's this sort of posh ex-army, young, striving, fast, go-getting guy, and his girlfriend, fiance, an accountant, all of whom live in that very middle-class bubble of converted Welsh farmhouses. And they're juxtaposed against these five guys who come from a multitude of working-class backgrounds, basically. And there's an immediate tension between them. Is that something that is there that sort of reflects something you think is in UK society at the moment?
Well, I think the whole...
I mean, it's always been there in terms of
has,
class, but
yeah.
is there something...
It's obviously rich territory. If you need, drama relies on conflict. So something like that is inherent conflict. And I think, those fault lines have just become even more stark, I think, the last few years. And obviously, getting an independent film off the ground isn't a quick process. So it's been sort of 6+ years in the offing and development. So obviously during that time, it's been fairly eventful period of British history. So with the referendum and everything, I think Britain's just felt a lot more sort of divided and polarised and tense and uncertain about where it's going than I can remember it at any time. So kind of a lot of that atmosphere and tone has fed into the film, I think, and that's the kind of the underpinning of it. And oddly, I was about 3 drafts in when the referendum result happened, and I looked at the script, and already, we had Victor was one of the key characters, who was this Ukrainian migrant worker who was the Daily Mail hate figure, and at that point, immigration was very much being pushed up the agenda, and it kind of gave a voice to the Jim and Steve characters in the script who are kind of quite openly sort of racist and prejudiced to him, and that seemed to be that those. I think the whole referendum dredged up a lot of stuff that had maybe been under the radar for a bit. So that kind of fed into it. Tax evasion on all sides. The builders are cash in hand. The guy in the house is putting money into tax havens. That felt quite topical. The whole haves and have-nots, fear of outsiders, all of that kind of has just soaked into the film, I think, over this period. And oddly, we were shooting it in March 2019, which was the actual week, the last day we shot was supposed to be the day we left the EU.
Yeah.
And so all the time we were on set, every time on the radio. One of the many missed deadlines, yeah. But all of that was in the news. And so, between every take, me and the actors would be standing there just talking about the whole Brexit debacle and all of that politics was swirling around, and it has fed into it, and it's made the thing, that tension was in the air, and I think it's in the film. And I kind of very much embraced all of those aspects. There's even things like when they have to make this decision whether or not they will take this action in terms of who takes the blame, they have to get a unanimous will of the group. And then even later on, when one of them seemed to have broken ranks, they have to get a unanimous decision on how they're going to divvy up the money. So these are all kind of nods to the referendum and the will of the group. And you even have things like the more they seem to be sort of shouting, we're in this together, and they're trying to hold this thing together, the more clearly it's all starting to fall apart. And all of these were sort of parallels. And essentially, this whole thing takes place on this rocky outcrop surrounded by water with a great big posh 500-year-old manor house and 2 porter cabins, which in my head was always a metaphor for Britain. So the whole film is essentially a metaphor, and even to the extent, and I really sort of lent into that, but it's kind of quite visual motifs and under the radar, that the opening and closing shots, there's very distinct red, white and blue in the colour scheme, in the art direction in those two. And even like the side of the builder's van, the slogan is building your future, restoring your past, because the whole debate that's opened up the last few years seems to be about claiming ownership of Britain, and this whole Spitfires and warm beer and village greens thing that seemed to be part of this fight of what is Britain. And so that was a kind of nod towards everyone's trying to be revisionist as to what does make Britain great and all this. So there's a lot of little sort of nods in there and layers.
And the guy trying to make the guy trying to renovate something from the past has got all of his money offshore in the Cayman Islands and is trying to avoid paying tax.
Exactly that, yeah.
Jacob Rees-Mogg moment there, basically.
Totally.
So, and then the whole cash in hand and the debt. The fact that the supposedly rich guy, is actually kind of poor all of a sudden in the film, or feels this level of poverty, that giving away a £98 bottle of wine at one point, and at the next point thinking he's got no money at all, except he's still got monogrammed leather bags and whatever in his life. That, I think that's an interesting tell on the way the class works, that the guys in the porter cabin have probably got more in their lives than he had to an extent, but they weren't recognising it.
Yeah, I saw something about all these, these people who are once great families, and they're living in these drafty old mansions, and they can only afford to heat 3 rooms because the heating bill on a place like that is enormous. And it's that there's a line in there. One of them's going, "Oh, I hear financially he was all fur coat and no knickers," because they can't let the family pile go because that is disgrace on the family. So they're knocking around in these places. But I mean, he is waiting for the family inheritance to come in, but he can't. He's got to wait for all the paperwork done. And that keeps getting kicked to further down the line. So in the meantime, he's kind of got these builders who he owes more and more money to, and that's the kind of the time bomb that's ticking away.
That's where the tension kicks in. Yeah. And I think, I mean, there is a great twist at the end of the film, which I think we definitely not reveal, obviously, but that then gives you an idea that we might all be being played in some way, shape, or form. That what you think is the primary drama might be a completely different thing going on behind the scenes.
But it's one of the things in there that kind of I don't know, a Brexit illusion, but when the chips are down, everyone just starts sort of fighting like dogs in a barrel. And in the film, everyone is ripping everyone off in a way, that whether they're exploiting them as a worker or underpaying them, or they're getting ripped off, shit flows downhill. So everyone's kind of getting screwed over by someone else. And, there are, that end twist, it alludes to kind of the vulture capitalists who are circling to pick over the bones of whatever happens after Brexit. In a way, that was my kind of nod to them. They're all playing a different role in terms of the sort of tapestry of modern Britain. Each of those characters was kind of, as well as being sort of hopefully a well-rounded person, is a kind of nod to a piece of the jigsaw of what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, and I thought Bob, the character Bob, is that Steve Spears?
Spears, yeah.
Bob. I've seen him in so many things, and I thought this is probably one of his best performances I've ever seen. He holds that whole group together really well, and shows emotion in lots of ways, but also that sort of tension of somebody just trying to do the right thing, but ending up in this mess that he's then in charge of somehow.
Totally. I mean, Steve was great. I mean, Uncle Bob, the Bob character in the middle, who's the foreman, he's got to try and bring this job in to keep his company afloat, and he's this good man stuck in this situation of trying to be the glue while everything is falling apart around him, and even his own flesh and blood are turning on him. And Steve is great. I mean, he's got such an expressive face, and that kind of almost that hangdog expression. He's a bear of a man as well, so he looks like he can handle himself, but he's very soft-centered in the film. And it was interesting. Steve's known as comedy. He does Upstart Crow, Stella. He's considered a comedy actor, as is predominantly James Lance from Ted Lasso, and from Alan Partridge and William Thomas, who's Gavin and Stacey, and Twin Town was a little bit tougher. But they were the three of them. We talk about the fact that they're considered to be comedy actors, yet here they are doing this really quite bleak sort of drama, and they loved it, flexing those different muscles. And Steve, I think, is that glue in the middle. It's just he's the pivot, really. You got the different factions kind of that develop within the group and between the group and the house. He's the just that poor guy you don't want to be, just trying to hold it all together by his fingertips as it all goes wrong. And it's a beautifully tragic.
Well, I mean, I think that's probably relevant in a way to my next thing, which is something I only know as a mate, is the struggle that you went through financially to get to this point, basically, because this was a passion project for you for a number of years. And it's always difficult raising money for low budget, mid budget UK.
How would you describe it? It's very low budget.
It's low budget, and as I understand it, it got lower very close to production in terms of filming.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I think when we originally had the script sort of budgeted, it came in at 3 or 4 times more than what we actually ended up having to shoot it on. So, and the number of shoot days, obviously, as the function of that goes down. So this was going to be 18 days, about 2 months before the shoot. Then we lost a chunk of money. Someone on the funders moved the goalposts, and then we lost a bit more money from somewhere else. So I ended up having to sort of remortgage to plug a hole in that. As soon as you plug one hole, there's another leak sprouts in your budget. So the shoot schedule went from 18 days, which was always going to be tight. Even when it was 24 days, I had a first AD doubting we could do it, and it ended up being 15 days, which is insane because I teach a bit at film school. In fact, Callum here was one of my pupils at Ravensbourne. And a lot of short films are shot in 3, 4, 5 days, and we shot a feature in 15 days. So I mean, that was just nuts. So yeah, it was.
And you were rewriting on set.
Well, I was rewriting in the run-up.
In order to hit those restrictions.
Well, totally. We lost a chunk of money, so I had to cut 12 pages just before, and even cut a character who'd been cast, which was quite painful. But then on set, the realities of shooting in 15 days, we were dropping scenes every day. So when you drop a scene, you're going, well, my biggest thing was making sure it worked. So I have to roll that little bit of story beat forward into something we hadn't shot yet. And so it was a lot of kind of, juggling and sticking plasters.
It really struck me, knowing you and the way that you work as well, that when I saw the film, I was very lucky that you invited me to see the preview in Brighton, and it was the last film I went to see with humans around me and more than one chair. Basically, it's like I remember those days of cinema. But it really struck me, knowing your story and the film story. I was thinking, well, which character is Will? Are you Bob, the builder, literally, who's trying to hold a team together and keep them all working at all costs? Or are you actually were you perceived as the guy in the high castle who wasn't going to pay anybody? How did it, I almost think the same tensions might have been there from as you were filming it.
I don't think I was probably at times I was a bit Bob, just trying to hold this thing together whilst it felt like it was slipping through our fingers at times. I don't think I was ever quite Simon, because he's the guy in the house, because it was all very democratic, because that big farmhouse, the big manor house that you see in the film, we had about 25 crew living upstairs and sleeping there. We had the camera kit stored in there. The big, you see there's the contrast between the guys in the port cabin and then this lovely old dining room with a big table. That was our unit base. And so it was all very democratic, because you tell all the actors' agents that yes, they'll have a green room and all this. And if they really insisted on a green room, we'd have to turf one of the crew out of their bedrooms upstairs. But it was, everyone just mucked in together. So everyone would queue and get their food from the hatch the same together. So, and the actors would just sit down at the end and next to the spark. It was all very, so I don't think there were particularly any hierarchies or airs and graces. It was just sort of kick scramble. But
But in a way, that shooting schedule and the restrictions that were put on you and everything else, and the fact that you're all kind of living together and working together for 15 days, I'm guessing that fed a lot into the performances to a great extent.
We actually had a couple of the actors who weirdly in the film end up killing each other, but a couple of the actors actually ended up sharing the Airbnb together and kind of becoming really good mates. I was a bit worried about it, because in the film they hate each other, but they're they're such good actors that didn't matter at all. But yeah, the living on top of each other in the middle of nowhere, money being very tight, things being very stressful, trying to bring a job in on time. Yeah, there are obvious parallels between art and the making of this piece at the time. Yeah, so things obviously got quite stressful. You're cutting scenes. I'm up all night rewriting scenes. I would get, I'd cut a scene at 3, 4 in the morning, come down to breakfast, and then I'd be told, avoid going upstairs because you've just cut a blood scene that someone was up till 4 or 5 in the morning building, and you've just cut it. And so it's always this juggle between trying to bring the thing in on time.
There was again, not to give a lot away, there's a lot of blood scenes. There's a lot of lovely shots of the floor covered in blood. Was it an Airbnb location? Did you have to clean all that up?
No, most of that blood was in the scabby old caravans, and I think one of them is still on the site. The farmer's using to put sheep in or something. They were both condemned. They weren't really fit for human habitation. So we found one of them like in a scrapyard, and the other one we got for free, but then apparently they'd sold to someone and he had to paint it the colour he wanted, and he bought it for 300 quid at the end of it. So they were fairly disposable. Most of the blood ended up being spilt in those locations. But they were very tight locations to work in, and they ended up getting very smelly. If you want to go and talk to an actor, you've got to squeeze past 6 people to get there. So it was all very we all got to know each other very well. But it was a I think the biggest cheer of the shoot was when we finally shot the last scene in the porta cabins and we could wrap those places, because they just got very hot, very stinky, and very cramped.
That's it. That's when you need the budget to do a sort of Top Gear stunt at the end and drop it from a crane or something, basically.
That would have been nice. That would have been
to all
very
the
good.
cheers of everybody in it. See, so the next thing that happens, you get the film made. It's out on release now digitally everywhere. But I know this of you, that you love cinema and you love the cinema experience and showing films in competition and in commercial cinema. And this year, you managed to draw the lucky straw of having a film ready to launch in March, April.
Yes,
basically.
yeah, the film.
And then we're into not only Brexit affecting your film, but now COVID affecting your film. Is that
Well, yeah.
What's it like to launch a movie during COVID?
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned that we had the screening in Brighton back in sort of January, and that was amazing to see it, like 300 or so people sat, next to each other without three spaces, and that was the first time to really experience it. You see, like in the second half, things get very tense. You're looking around and thinking, well, no one's taken a breath for 10 minutes. This is good. This is working. And you can feel in the room that crackle. And you don't get that when it's digital. I mean, we premiered at Fright Fest, and that was supposed to be two screenings at Leicester Square, which I was looking forward to, and then that ended up moving online. And it was weird because I think I came around to it, and I think the Fright Fest guys did a great job. And you realise actually we probably have more of a reach online, because I was getting texts all days from mates up north and people I hadn't seen in ages, and family members going, "Oh, we've got our ticket, we're sitting down to watch it," and everyone was sharing photos of them with their beers, and there were drinks set up in front of the TV ready for it, and then the phone was pinging, and then at the end, we got reviews came straight in within the hour, and they were all really glowingly good reviews, so that was great. So it's been weird. I love going to film festivals, taking your film, you suffer for it, and then you get to see a bit of the world and go to see other cities and see your film screened in a beautiful old cinema in another city with subtitled, and it works, and you can, this is what cinema's about. So I really do miss that. Festivals obviously been cancelled, and even film markets have been kind of scaled back or online. So it's not been easy. I don't know how Brexit will affect things, because obviously we've only released in the UK, so we're due to release in the rest of the world and Europe next year, which is great timing. In fact, first quarter next year. So God knows what's going to happen with that. Will we have to suddenly pay tariffs on, selling the film to France, Germany? I have no idea.
Well, there'll be some form of European arrangement, I guess, in terms of how that works, basically, which we're opting out of now, so that we can't do the reverse for American films and everything else. You now have to negotiate. I think movies might start costing us a lot more money in this country if we're not careful.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that we can still film a lot of them. I guess when we become a tax haven and we've got two big film studios over here and incredibly talented crew, it might be that we become a location to come and film in, basically.
Well, a lot of the American films already do come here to shoot, as you said.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on interest rates and things, but we do have the sort of perceived as having the best cast and crew, in the world, and we've got great facilities. So I'm sure people still keep coming here, but how much of that obviously trickles down beyond sort of crew and actors into the general industry is sort of probably a point of hot topic.
And in terms of moving forward, do you want to make more feature films, or as having remortgaged slightly for this one, is your wife saying no more?
She won't know. No, yeah, I do. To get this off the ground, this was kind of on the basis of, I'd made a short film called Man in Fear, which was quite different. It was about conceptual artists who create accidents as works of art. So it was kind of like, imagine if Hurst and Emin and Lucas and all those guys had kind of looking at the more extreme sort of art that they made, pushing that to the limits. Well, what if they created an accident? And this was the piece. So I'd made a short based on that, which we had James Lance from this film again was in, because he lived in Brighton for years. So I got to know him, worked on a few things. We had Luke Treadaway. That did really well, and it got into a lot of festivals, and it was made as a proof of concept for a feature. So I had a lot of interest from studios about making that as a feature. But obviously the trouble is, when you got these very elaborate kind of grown-up mousetrap chain reaction accidents, they don't come cheap. So they kind of ran the budget and looked at it, said, well, I can't get you bonded, which means insured as a first-time filmmaker. This isn't a first-time film budget. So they said, I'll go away and make a low-budget feature and then come back. So obviously I've done that. So I should be knocking on those doors again soon.
So that's the progress that you know.
So yeah, Man in Fear will be...
And do you see, I mean...
In the short term, is COVID going to stop you doing things like that?
Do you see as a,
Yeah, well, the good thing is obviously being a writer director, I can hold up and write. And then I think productions are slowly creeping back out, but COVID has whacked quite a premium, sort of anywhere between 7 and 15% onto budgets of TV and film because all the distancing, the testing, you can't, you won't see anything with crowd scenes for the next year or so. I don't think there are certain
no.
things that will play that you can do and can't do. So I think because I'm at the point of development, I can hold up and get my script writing head on. I can't see myself shooting anything for a good 6-9 months, really. In really any sort of form.
Have you been inspired during lockdown to think of something that could be filmed that way? Basically, I don't know if you saw what's the thing that was on BBC Two with
Staged with Michael Sheen and that one.
Stage.
That one.
Yeah,
Staged was great.
yeah.
I really
Which I thought
enjoyed
was
that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
To,
Well, actually,
yeah.
I'm teaching directing actor workshops, which I've got one tomorrow night at the Screen and Film School in Brighton. And I've been doing those live with actors and students, but as of next week, because the students obviously all go home early, I've got to do one via Zoom. So I'm getting my head into how I'm going to be teaching directing acting workshops via Zoom. But I've got a few ideas. I wrote a script in lockdown, which then lockdown kind of finished. I didn't get out there, but it was about a kind of college professor who's trying to get his weed dealer to come on Zoom and show his face so that he can prove that he's healthy and fit because his daughter is vulnerable and high risk, and he's trying to convince this weed dealer to turn on his camera on Zoom and everything that a dealer wouldn't want to do. So that was just that. I wrote a kind of 5-page little thing on that. So I might dust that off and do that with the actors next week.
It's interesting, isn't it? But I have a vague concept that next year nobody will want to see a drama or a documentary or a comedy made using Zoom.
I think you might be right. There's a TV idea that I'm working on which feels quite sort of COVID shoot friendly because it's about 10 people on a clinical drugs trial on a remote location. So it's called 10 Blind Mice. And the fact that has just 10 characters, lots of interaction sort of remotely and automatically from the drug testing company through sort of tannoys and screens and things. And it's just these 10 characters, no crowd scenes, no nothing else. That feels kind of quite achievable under these conditions. So I'm hoping that might even perversely kind of feel more feasible. So who knows, swings and roundabouts.
Actually seems quite relevant. Seems quite relevant as well. In fact, I was reading the other day about various accelerated test programs for COVID, for the vaccine, where people are willingly getting COVID in order to test the vaccines, and they get put up in what they thought were hotel accommodation for 2 months, and it turns out they're kind of almost in a prison environment, basically, and which is a real story. I'm sure that will come out as relevant. Well, listen, Will, I am so pleased that you've got your film out. I can't tell you how exciting it is to go to Amazon and pay. I paid Amazon, which means that you get bugger all, I'm sure.
Yeah, 10p next year, yeah.
But I totally thought I was going to ring you last night and say, just send me a copy of the film so that I could watch it and again, and therefore it's fresh in my mind. I thought, no, I'm not going to get a free copy. He's lost cinema tickets and everything else. I'll pay for this. But if we figure out what the best place where you get the most money is, we'll put that link under this.
Yeah, I have asked the producers what's the split, and they seem to think it's all kind of much the same, and it's not particularly generous in any of them. But if one of them is a little bit better, I'll flag that. But yeah, I'm still waiting for an answer on that.
Let us know.
And the other,
well, I'm so pleased for you. It's a great film. Is it? There is one thing that I think my audience can probably help with to some extent. You were telling me yesterday that on IMDb there's a sort of almost a culture of people going in and giving 0 or 1 ratings to brand new films.
Yeah, this is the joys of an online release rather than cinema releases. Our star rating for the film was kind of 8 point something and was getting very pretty much across the board great reviews. And then suddenly yesterday it plummeted to 5 point something because apparently this is a thing that trolls do. They just give 1 stars and crap 1-star reviews to every new film that comes out. Because I actually got really annoyed and I went and looked back on some of the links and they've just given 1 star to every film that's come out this last month just to pull the average down. So this is the joy of an online release for battling against the trolls. So yes, if anyone, and if your viewers and listeners do watch the film, please do leave a review on IMDb and a star rating just to pull it back up where it kind of
I'll
feels
stick a link in the post. If there's anything we could do to try and bump that up for you, that would be great.
That would be great.
Listen, Will Jewell, master filmmaker, and good mate. And I really, really am very proud of what you've made there. It's a lovely thing to go and watch.
Thank you very much, mate. In fact, I think going for a pint with you was the last time I was in a pub pre the first lockdown, which feels a long time ago now.
That's a fond memory for you.
It is, yeah.
Which is entirely why you don't care about being locked down, because your last pub experience doesn't need repeating.
No.
Lovely to talk to you, my friend.
And you, mate.
And we'll see you hopefully in a pub or a cinema very soon.
Great, lovely. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
And we're out.